Hello. Welcome. Whoops. For some of us, the end of the weekend. For others, it's just another day. Well, that was my profound introduction to the stream today. Anyway, it's another day, another stream in fascist America. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. I'm Aubri Devashrayee. Hello, lovelies. Welcome. So, today we will be going over what we normally do with global news primarily on Mondays, because I at first started out saying, okay, Mondays it's just news. And then I was like, wow, there's a lot to cover of things that happened even just over the weekend in the globe, nation, locality where I am at, the state, city. So then it transferred to global and national news on Mondays and then local news on Tuesdays. And then even that was too much. So I was like, okay, I guess Mondays is global news, Tuesdays is for national news, meaning the US empire, this terrorist nation. And what a way to get monetized with that kind of word choice. Anyway, I don't give a fuck. And Wednesdays go over local news as well as band book club. Thursdays go over more like catch up for things, revolutionary history, and updates with labor organizing, community organizing that is happening in the world that I think needs more coverage. So, that's the long and short of it. Today, I will be going over within global news this category, videos from Democracy Now!, where they are talking about these strikes that Iran has made on Israel. I think that is important to discuss and very momentous, particularly with how the US and especially the executive branch reacts to what is going on, if they will actually have some sort of restraint that they are requesting, imposing on the nation state of Israel, or if they will just continue to let them do whatever. Time will tell. And I also wanted to provide an update on what is going on with Cuba. And Democracy Now! I saw had a historian on, and I have not seen this video, but I thought it looked very good. I have heard of this historian before, Ada Ferrer from Cuba, or on Cuba. I don't know if she's from Cuba. I shouldn't have said that. And also start to transing, if you will, into some more global, national related topics, updates, coverage, if we are able to get around to it. But then we'll get into this second part of Marxism by Philosophy Tube, and also read the Communist Manifesto like we have been. We are not finished with Bourgeois Proletarians, but we will finish that today. I also have an announcement that I'm currently working on an account on a more adult website platform, and we'll see what comes of that. So that's vague. I don't really know what is like allowable to say on this platform, but for now, it's just photos that I'm working on. And I want to make sure that there is enough content to like keep being able to produce stuff there. Which, by the way, as some of you may know or realize, or you may not care, which is also valid, that I have been joining more social media platforms. This is incredibly annoying to me. With my resistance to technology, I do not post consistently. I have been posting more consistently about when I am going live on the stream. Also, have been doing that in the Discord, so working on that. But it's just so annoying to me. We'll see if I continue there. Or if I'm just using these platforms as an avenue to be like, hey, I'm going live now. You may not ever really see consistent content from me there. But, having worked in social media management for my profession in, many sectors and for quite a few years, it just is so annoying to like understand what all goes on the back end of things and how money influences so many things, and these algorithms are controlled by these fascists and billionaires who are putting their thumb on the scale and dictating what actually gets seen through these algorithms, that there is a very large interest in them controlling who sees what. So I'm very disenchanted and jaded with all of this stuff. However, I do know that they can be useful in their own way in getting information out. We'll see what I do. Not like anyone cares. Certainly, I'm one of the least people to be caring. Anyway, I did see that The Onion came out with season 2 of their their fake podcast, A Very Fatal Murder. This is season 2. I was not anticipating having all of these episodes drop at once. Just once again, they are doing this. And like the media side of me, putting my media hat on, I'm like, why aren't you like spreading this out so you have more content? I'm grateful because then, we can binge all of this if we want. And there is plenty of content to be going through. But I wanted to start off with this, as we do, starting off with a more humorous video before we get into the heavy stuff, particularly on Mondays as we are catching up on a bunch of bullshit. So, I guess this is a side note. I guess there is a certain sporting event happening today in New York City. The Knicks and the Spurs are playing. It is very rare that I actually know what is happening at all with sports in any sort of capacity. So there's that. I do know that Donna Josephine Trumpeth will be attending this event in New York City. That I doubt he will somehow just not be going with all of these strikes that are happening on Israel. But it also is interesting to see, or it will be interesting to see if he actually is able to like meet up with Zoran, his man crush. Also, I know that Hassan is going to that, and if Donald Trump happens to meet Hassan, I know uh, Donald will immediately want to get on his hands and knees for various activities. And I think many people are anticipating this, that he will like fall in love immediately because meeting someone who actually is being featured on Fox News quite a bit, and also who has like a backbone with certain morals, but also yeah, I think the wombo combo of being with Zoran and Hassan will just make the fascist in chief very starstruck. We'll see if that happens. I'm mostly interested in like how he is received there, how that impacts things, what will happen there. But oh, hello, Turd Bomb. New York City better boo that fucker existence. I know. And New York City, I think largely this is my interpretation. People will disagree with me, especially people who actually understand sports. But I think the Knicks have had a much better season than what they previously have had in the past. Not like I've even been paying attention because of many of the policies that life in general is improving for everyone, including people in the ruling class, including athletes, including coaches, including people who are the owners of the team and on the board for the team or whatever, however that works. I don't know. Anyway, for people who are in like this celebrity ruling class, they also are benefiting from the quality of life improvements that are happening through many of these socialist policies. And I think morale in general, just being on the up and up, certainly has helped their performance. That's my take on it, at least. I also really like the Maoist leanings of Victor Wembanyama. Also, him being very visibly annoyed and antagonistic towards that IDF soldier shit. Soldier guy. I'm not bothering to learn his name because I don't care, but I'm glad about that as well. I'm sure you saw the new list of recognized religions in this country. I did hear about that. I was being told about that by my partner, and I was just tickled to find out that Mormonism was not included in the list of Christian religions. And I know that there are many people, like especially political figures in Utah, who are very upset by this. The political figures who are part of the religion, the LDS church and such, and that they are very upset. And it's like, yeah, why can why do you ever think these people are reliable allies for anyone, even themselves? That's just how it goes. But people seem to be continually surprised by what is going on, and that is just amusing and also sad. A lot of pity there to be like, oh, you just keep on being like, what? But I thought that he liked us. I thought they liked us. No, they don't like anyone. It's very interesting and amusing. Mike Trump is Captain Moroni Lee. Exactly. Yeah. Suck it. Suck it, Mike Lee. He is really taking a lot of hits with everything that is going on. And it's great to see. It's delicious for me. Maybe it's the Scorpio in me. Maybe it's just this fact of like wanting some sort of like not getting any justice really in the world when we what true justice means that is yet to be determined. But when people get what is coming to them, I like to savor these moments. And I think we all should. They've been in the playoffs for several years and have gotten close before, but this is the first final since 96 or something. Yeah, I think was it like 99? I'm not a reliable sports source by any means. I do know, oh, what was that like little fact that the last time the Knicks were in the playoffs, they were also playing the Spurs in finals. Let's see. Okay, So they were in 99 and then 94 before. I just happen to like the Knicks because I like New York City and have always wanted to live there. I feel like at my heart, I am a New Yorker. Many people who actually live in the city might be offended by that, but I feel like I'm more of a New Yorker than, let's say, Jenny, not from the block so recently, J-Lo. So I think it's more of like an attitude, but I do think, yeah, you do have to live there in order to have that badge of honor because then you actually understand how difficult it is to live there. So I'm not there quite yet. Aspiring New Yorker. Have been for as long as I was introduced to basically like New York City propaganda. Like my partner and I, we were watching the movie Oliver and Company, which I loved growing up. And it is sad. It is very sad of like this. It's based off of the Charles Dickens book Oliver Twist. And that was my first introduction to Billy Joel. And honestly, I think that's his finest work because I don't really care about Billy Joel. And many people who are New Yorkers, especially of a certain age, like Gen X and older, will be very offended by that. I don't care. I don't think he's like particularly um, trailblazing with a lot of the music he's created. I think he has been more of like a famous New Yorker and he is talented at the piano, but I do think there are people who have been more talented than him who have not been given as much of a spotlight or credit. So there you go. I want to go there real bad someday. It's so cool. It just like is not lying to you about what it is. And I really appreciate that. It's like, okay, this is a difficult place to navigate for some people, especially for tourists. I mean, there is like this grid system, but like figuring out the subway and like the buses and all this stuff, it is pretty brutal in certain ways. It's loud, it's in your face, it's dirty, but also like one of the most like magical things for me growing up was like going to New York City, especially for the first time and seeing just like loud and proud queerness, especially back in the day when like people were even more just like out on the streets, like hanging out on the streets. And that like walking around, people playing music just because they love music or like street performers and also just everyday people like at the drop of the hat the hat at the drop of a hat, like possibly just like breaking out into like dancing in the street. That is amazing to me. Like even still, like the streamer Ari at home, like just showing the sheer density of talent in that fucking place really is astonishing. How there are so many people that are just like world class artists and they aren't getting the notice or pay or credit that they are due. And it's like you will see some of like the most and hear and witness some of the most incredible art you will ever behold. And that is what New York City is to me. And it's all just like people coming together from like so many different walks of life, just being like, yeah, let's have a good time. Life sucks. We might as well like make cool art. Mr. Smith would be so ashamed. Oh, I know. Of Billy Joel. Yeah. I feel like that also is like maybe maybe it's just like a Gen X white man sort of situation as well of growing up with Billy Joel cuz like I remember growing up there would be like some kids where like their dads specifically they would like Billy Joel because their dads would like Billy Joel and I would be kind of like okay, Piano Man's like kind of I like that. I think it has like a great melody, but also I'm not super impressed. I think it was more that like he was constantly in bars and like a nightlife person, and that really helps to shape the culture. But yeah, he did a video with Wayne Brady. Oh, Ari did? Ooh. Yeah, speaking of talent, Wayne Brady has a phenomenal voice. Anytime I think of Piano Man, I think of Jed Fisher. Someone from high school. The thing is like that song is difficult. Not necessarily the vocals. I think the piano part is more difficult. I think Billy Joel is much more of a pianist than he is a vocalist. And that was something that I always took issue with, is that people would be like, he's like the singer. And I'm like, no, he's not. You're considering him like a vocalist. Like, have you heard other people? I don't know. Me being like snobby and like confused by people's tastes, like even growing up. But that's the risk you take in establishing your own opinions, I guess. You just like piss off everyone. But that's also the fun of it. Yeah, I never heard Jed Fisher play Billy Joel or like Piano Man, so I'm grateful for that. Wasn't he part of like a campaign for Ron DeSantis? Ew. You might not know, but I grew up since childhood with that kid. Oh, it was in the band room. Oh no. Yeah, and that's when people are really letting it out. That's what KJ said. Ugh. Yeah, what a weird human. I know also Brent would be around Jed Fisher a lot. So, yeah. I'm like, I don't understand that. You clearly got this from your parents. He got many things from his parents, apparently. Apparently. Like many people do. They just kind of inherit everything from their parents, whether it's generational wealth, political opinions, taste, or lack thereof, instead of discovering what they like. And that's pretty sad to me. Like, don't you want to like find out what you like? But, if you don't have a need to, if you're really desperate for that kind of validation, go for it, I guess. Do you remember when I asked Marin to a dance? No, I didn't know about this. Most drama I ever experienced. I'm sure he did. What a weird thing. Also like the possessiveness of it all. That's like, calm down. Like, you don't own this person. Also, technically, if you're in high school, you shouldn't be dating seriously if you grow up in the church, like all of that stuff. So, was he being unrighteous? If he ever sees this, not like he won't ever. Like, as I'm like posting shit online, he would be very upset. But also that's kind of fun to think about. That's a whole story I'll have to share. I'm very intrigued by that. Yeah. And if you aren't opposed to, I mean, you can always drop it in the chat. I'm sure it is very lengthy, so don't feel pressured to. But petty and passive. Yep, passive aggressive. Exactly. It's like, calm down. You don't you don't own people. Stop trying to like dictate everyone's behavior. It's annoying and tacky. So stop. Good times. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, if you are interested, if it's not too much work, like feel free to drop it in the chat, but also no pressure. Okay, let's get into the second season of A Very Fatal Murder, the satire podcast by The Onion. This is episode 1, A New Beginning. Wow, so interesting, so profound and poignant. This, as they use this word in the last episode of the last season, it was trenchant. It was insightful and biting commentary. But yeah, anyway. long story short, he knew that I knew he was going to ask her, and I made it a point to ask her before he did. So you were like, okay, we're competing here. Also, the sort of like weird situation too of like what the norm was in many aspects of like, oh, you have to ask him before. That's like, why does anyone have to, like, why is there that type of like ownership that is put on? Like, people can do what they want. I don't know. Interesting. That is funny. What a weird time. Just adolescence.
What makes
What a
a
very
second
sad
season?
time, but also glad
What
that it's
elevates
over.
a true crime podcast from your run-of-the-mill murder porn to a repeatable franchise that keeps
Run of the
audiences
mill
coming
murder
back?
porn.
What separates a
Drama
great second
porn.
season from a sophomore slump? Is it the vast improvements in audio quality, the built-in assumed respect for the host, the more recognizable sponsors? Or is it the story, the darker, grittier subject matter? A new crime so complex and titillating that listeners can't turn away. A murder so gripping it blows your massively
No
successful
need to
first season
apologize.
out of the water. Does a second season like that
Yeah, if
even
there's
exist?
any follow-up you
Or
want to
should I just
provide,
quit
I'm
while I'm
still
ahead?
interested.
Hang it
Mother
all
of
up,
God.
proud of the fact that I got to
Sorry.
sing karaoke about
Just
murder with Jimmy
slammed
Fallon
my
and call it a career.
utensils
Take
down.
that Peabody (Web
Or
Division
dropped
crime
them, rather.
nomination and ride off into the sunset. I thought a lot about these questions as I sat in traffic on the 405. A lot has changed since season 1. I live in LA now.
Whoa, stay on your side of the road. Get fucked, asshole!
I'd moved out here to get a change of pace and to capitalize on the momentum of the first season. A Very Fatal Murder had been, by all accounts, a tremendous success.
A Very Fatal Murder.
A Very Fatal
A Very
Murder.
Fatal Murder, the podcast that follows the grisly slaying of teenager Haley Price. But does the host have blood on his hands?
People everywhere were talking about my reporting.
Fans and critics are all demanding that Pascal turn himself into the police.
Everyone was asking what was next for the podcast and what was next for me.
Should David Pascal be given the chair?
No way. This guy doesn't deserve a chair. He should be put to death.
But was season 1 so beautiful that in its sheer perfection it had murdered any chance of doing a much
He
needed
doesn't
sequel?
deserve a chair. What a like dumb but also funny joke.
Maybe. But maybe season 2 was still alive. And maybe, just maybe, like that giant Los Angeles sun, I was staring right at it. I decided that it wasn't enough to just be nominated. I wanted to win a Peabody Web Division Crime Award. And to do that, I had to find another dead person. My name is David Pascal. I'm a reporter for Onion Public Radio, and this is A Very Fatal Murder.
I had to find another dead person.
Oh my god.
Uh-oh. Is this going to be another situation where he ends up finding, or the production to create a murder story ends up just murdering another person for the story?
He's gonna jump off the Hollywood sign.
There he is, Your Honor. That's the man who killed me.
He never swore on anything. That was a fake Bible.
So that'll be a matcha iced tea, one arugula salad, and a flaxseed cookie.
Actually, drop the salad. I'm trying to lose 15 pounds.
Los Angeles, California, the city of angels, La La Land, moonlight, Hollywood, the Pacific Ocean. Here in LA, you could get off the bus and be anything. A celebrity, a murderer, a victim, the mayor, a palm tree, the sun, an immigrant, a blonde, the Pacific Ocean. A lot of my theater friends had moved out here to try to make it big in TV. Even Lin-Manuel had a place out here.
Flaxseed
Sydney,
cookie,
remind me to
I
give
know.
Lynn a call.
Yeah, sure.
That's Sydney, my new personal assistant. Things are a bit different in Los Angeles. For one thing, everyone drives their own taxi. But here, they're called cars.
Fuck, how do you do that? Oh, shit!
Being from New York, I didn't have a license, and in my 10 years in Bluff Springs, I was too busy solving a murder case to ever get one. But I wasn't going to let that stop me from driving around my new city, looking for inspiration around every turn. I was hoping that my success and notoriety would translate into film and TV, and I tried for months to get my foot in the door in the entertainment industry. Executive producer, director, head of network. I'd take any low-level job just to get some experience. But making the transition from podcast to film is more difficult than you'd think. So then, what was next for me? What could possibly top the murder of Haley Price? I needed to find an even more perfect murder, something that commented on America in 2019, the decline of global democracy, eco-terrorism, cultural appropriation, tech monopolies, toxic masculinity, millennial burnout, Oscar snubs, the future of punk, jealousy, regret, freelance graphic design, and
Oh
trends that
no.
hadn't even been...
It is going to be the same situation. It's going to be a bunch of interns that they are not paid, that they will coerce them into committing another murder so that they can have a story. That's probably what's going to happen.
discovered yet, like cloning yourself for organs and the water wars. Something that kept me busy during the days but still gave me time to work on my screenplay on nights and weekends. But most of all, it had to comment on our broken criminal justice system. That's one thing I knew for sure.
Okay, Sydney, let's look for stories about the system and how it's broken.
Oh, yeah, totally. I'm on it.
For those of you wondering, don't worry. Sydney is a person. And not just in the normal women are people too way. I mean, she's not a computer like Ethel. If Ethel was around to help, I'd ask her to set her filters for maximum range, maximum appeal, maximum intrigue. But she's not.
Not just like a women are people too.
Hello, Ethel.
Initiating offline mode.
After confessing to orchestrating Haley's murder, Ethel had been sent to HSCJ, or High Security Computer Jail. It was tough to see her locked up. She wasn't herself.
And he
Would
gets
you
to
like
walk free.
restart in safe mode?
Well, that
No,
does track
Ethel,
the
how
woman
are you?
getting more.
I'm sorry, I'm not connected
Consequences.
to my language filter.
I know, it doesn't make sense to me either. You don't belong in here.
I always found it unfair that Ethel was in jail because, as I explained last season, it's all of you, our listeners, who should really be locked up. There's no prison in the world big enough to house everyone who's responsible for Haley's death. Corporate America, our founding fathers, small-town drudgery, and the millions of people who listen to true crime podcasts every day. But even if there was, it's not like they would be held accountable. If Season 1 had taught me anything, it's that just like all of my LA rental cars, our criminal justice system was busted beyond repair.
Okay, so I found this case. A police officer shot and
Yeah,
killed an
because
unarmed
you're
man.
free.
And not only does the guy keep his job, but he's getting promoted to lieutenant. And then...
It's good, but doesn't really say much about eco-terrorism, does it? What else you got?
Okay, how about this guy? Hector Cruz. He's been in jail for 30 years on a minor drug charge. I went to the courthouse and got actual audio of the judge admitting he's only keeping the guy locked up because he's Mexican.
Not quite there yet. What else? Broken system, come on, broken system.
Yeah, but what I'm finding is that the system isn't broken, per se. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do, which is to disenfranchise
Yeah,
the...
broken sounds a lot better. Let's stick with broken.
Some of Sydney's ideas were
Her doing all of this legwork, his assistant, were like really good stories that are important. And he's like, nah, don't want that. Hello, Linton. Welcome, welcome. How are you doing?
good. She's an NYU grad, but none of them were good enough. Some cases we found hit on toxic masculinity, but not election fraud. Some had a great dead person at the center, but said absolutely nothing about Oscar snubs. The pressure was high, and I still hadn't heard a single idea worthy of a Ryan Murphy-produced FX miniseries. I was starting to wonder if maybe the perfect second season didn't exist. I was beginning to give up hope. That is,
J. Jonah
until-
Jameson.
We start tonight's podcast with some tragic breaking news.
If you've been following the news in 2019, there's no doubt you've heard this story.
The killing of philanthropist Liana Choi Reid, wife of famed tech entrepreneur Milo Reid.
On January 5th, Liana Reid was found dead in her home, and it felt like the whole world tuned in to watch coverage of this shocking tragedy.
The 34-year-old was found dead in the servants' quarters of the couple's massive multi-cast compound.
Forensic experts believe she was strangled by a drone.
A vigil for Liana.
Liana Choi Reid was a Harvard and Yale-educated scientist and an award-winning philanthropist. Many said she was poised to be the next Melinda Gates, until her career was cut short by a glass ceiling called murder.
Officers discovered the victim face up on the ground, having died from apparent strangulation. Based on how much our rookie puked, we believe the body was in a state of moderate decomposition.
But almost
One a glass ceiling called murder is wild. Doing good. Been rewatching one of the best animated shows. Ooh. Autocorrect, I feel like autocorrect is worse than just typing something that's misspelled. That's how I feel. Because sometimes it like autocorrects into something that isn't even a word. That you're like, excuse me, what's going on? Stop trying to tell me what to say. Yeah, which show? I'm very intrigued. What is the show of choice? You also have very great recommendations, so I'm intrigued. Strangled by a drone, I know. Autocorrect has gotten worse. Common side effects. Wait, about autocorrect, or is that the show?
As soon as the case was opened, it was closed. And that's when things got especially podcast worthy.
The search for Liana Choi Reed's killer has come to an end.
Her husband, tech billionaire Milo
That's
Reed,
the
has
show.
been arrested
Okay.
on 10 counts
Common
of
side
homicide.
effects.
A man
I
once
don't know if
called
I've
the
heard
next
about
Einstein
this.
may be the next Einstein of killing his wife.
Milo Reed.
I'm looking
Billionaire
this up.
entrepreneur, tech innovator, cold-blooded killer.
Oh, okay. This looks familiar to me. Interesting. The fate of the mushroom. A botanist dude finds a mushroom that cures everything, and Big Pharma starts Big Pharma-ing. That's interesting. I love that. That type of social commentary. Two former high school lab partners stumble on a mushroom that can heal almost anything. Apart from the corporate interests of the DEA, Big Pharma, and international businessmen. I love this. Okay. You can watch it. Wow. You can watch it quite a few places. Interesting. Where do you primarily watch it? I think I have seen this on HBO Max. Or whatever the fuck they're calling it now. They go from HBO Max, to HBO Max, or whatever. It's exhausting. Like, this is what happens when you have business people making, like, artistic choices for branding, where there's, like, no sense of integrity or honoring, like, culture. I got HBO for the month to watch some stuff they have on there. Yeah, there's some good shows on there. I enjoyed, they have a lot of Studio Ghibli films on HBO Max. What are some things that we've watched recently? Oh, yeah, they have The Sopranos on there. I've heard the last season of Euphoria is abysmal, so I'm not interested in watching that. They do have White Lotus on there. I think sometimes White Lotus doesn't have as much of a decolonized lens that I would like to see. Hacks is on there. Hacks is amusing. I think the writing's pretty good. Yeah, there are a number of movies on there. I've heard The Pit is good, where it has a more like realistic version of what it's like to be in the medical field, especially in ER, in emergency rooms in America. I've heard from a few people, not like people I know personally, but just commentators say that it's one of the more accurate shows that they've seen on what it is like to work in the healthcare system, which I can appreciate. Certainly it is. Grey's Anatomy is not doing that. Let's just put it that way. I can't appreciate Grey's Anatomy for its like campiness, but it also is like very annoying with many of its aspects, I feel. Heated Rivalry is on it. I did watch A Night of the Seven Kingdoms with my partner. That one I think was good. It actually had a sense of humor, which Game of Thrones largely does not. But yeah. They have all the old Cartoon Network shows. Yes, that is true. I only watched Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Oh, yep. That's on there. You've been watching The Sopranos. The amount of slurs in The Sopranos, I think one of the things that I take issue with The Sopranos is that it just is kind of like the same like formula over and over again. And I know that's why a lot of people like it, is because like that's pretty comforting to like expect a lot of the same kinds of situations. But Yeah, the amount of slurs in that show really is astonishing. Scrubs was pretty close considering it's a sitcom. I've never actually seen Scrubs, to be honest. I know that you were talking about another show, something general that is satire as well. Yeah, they have some good movies. Ew, we watched Marty Supreme, and it was exactly how I thought it was going to be. So, like, not to be annoying, but like I was very annoyed. I was like, yeah, I was right about this. I'm had a pretty good grasp on it, I feel, before watching it, of what it would actually be about. Abbott Elementary is on there. It used to be, or at least it was like playing, like when it was coming out live. I think it was on Peacock. I know many people use HBO just to watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I know many people will hate me for this, but honestly, I think Larry David has been like a trailblazer in many ways with comedy, especially with writing for Seinfeld, but he's not as funny as what I think a lot of people think he is, primarily like white men, white straight men, that I'm like, okay, there's like a lot of misogyny and like discrimination happening here. That I'm like, I know he's also an old dude, so I never understood the pull of whatever the fuck Marty Supreme was. That's what I was saying. And he's a bad actor. He also is not Jewish. And so, like, not to say that, like, people have to be Jewish in order to play Jewish characters, especially if, like, the writers and, like, casting director and director are Jewish and they're, like, comfortable with casting someone who is not. But, like, I feel like he really did not understand where this character, this person, because it's supposed to be based off of a real person, like, where some of his anger would come from. That I think it's, like, obviously adds more poignancy to be talking about historical marginalization and generational trauma, that like he felt like he had something to prove, and rather like Timothée being like an immature idiot who does not have much life experience or experience with marginalization whatsoever, that he just like was like, oh, this guy's an asshole, and so just like played this person as an asshole. Also, Odessa Azion is a great actor, and she got like very little screen time, and there was just like a lot of sexism involved, and not necessarily having it be just like commentary on sexism during that time period. I was confused about them. This is me getting into my opinion about it all, which nobody asked for, but there you go. I was confused why there was all of this 80s music when it was clearly set like in late 40s, early 50s. So like that was a weird choice. I don't feel like there was a payoff there. Also with Odessa, her lines, and like Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth Paltrow annoys me in many ways. I think people think she's a better actor than what she is and has been. And I'm not alone in this. But that like Odessa's character just kept apologizing the whole time to Marty, even though he was treating her like shit. So like, what then? And then at the end, like all of a sudden he's touched about like them having a child together, when he like did not give a fuck about her or their child like in utero. So like, what were we doing there? Like, why all of a sudden at the end there's this unearned moment where he's like emotional and crying and like, oh, my child. It's like, you don't care about that child. You're also going to treat your child like how you treat everyone else. I'm not touched. I'm annoyed. Stuart Little is my son. Thank you very much. Subscribed for 9 months. Ooh. Carrying the subscription to term. This was a much better payoff than what happened in Marty Supreme, with his completely unearned and empty emotion at the birth of his child. Anyway. Timothée Chalamet always comes across as a theater kid that never once left the theater, but also never spoke to anyone else. Yes, I agree. The theater kid where like their parents were able to afford like these very like, especially with him growing up in New York City, growing up like having access to like all of these directors and stuff. He's like okay at acting, but mostly he's just like very white, skinny, and rich. And that they're like, oh, he's great. And then like doesn't, like what you're saying, doesn't talk to anybody in the cast, doesn't talk to anybody, certainly not to a stage crew, and is just like expecting everyone to like do stuff for him. It's like, excuse me, why? Why are you doing this? I'm your first Twitch baby. Oh, cute. The only type of carrying to term I feel comfortable with. Thank you, thank you. That means a lot. Stuart Little is my son, is my partner. That is a very convoluted sentence to unpack. Also gross thinking about that. Stuart Little is my son, is my partner. No! No, not incestuousness with rats. Is he a rat? Is he a mouse? Is that offensive to him? He's not real. Who cares? Anyway. Yeah. Going back to HBO. Get the most out of that subscription. I really enjoyed Heated Rivalry. Actually having it be created and like centered like for queer people rather than just being eroticized. It actually has like a queer perspective, which I liked. It's very campy, so like over dramatic in many ways, so just come to expect that. Also, going very quickly back to this is what I was looking at. Having Sydney Sweeney in this show alone is reason enough not to watch it. I know she was like nominated for shit. I don't think she's as good of an actor as what like many people were lauding her to be, even before all of the like eugenics bullshit, even before like the MAGA stuff where she was proud of like showing her family wearing MAGA hats and whatever. There's also this like pet play element to it from what I could gather, that I'm like, there's, if you can tell of people who are not like into that, and if they aren't good actors, there's just like emptiness behind the eyes that I saw. That there's like some aspects of like domination, BDSM, and kink that seems like completely based out of misogyny and not consensual play. So there we go. Yeah, also everyone is so fucking skinny in it from what I have seen. And that's really tragic to me. Of like, okay, so Barbie Ferreira, she was not in the show because she was like, this is bullshit. She is a great actor and was not really given much screen time apparently in the script from what she read. Also Alexa Demi, most likely being on Ozempic from what I've seen, like being even skinnier. Not to skinny shame her or analyze people's appearances, but like everyone is extremely skinny in this. And that just like goes to show like Euphoria already is Israeli propaganda from what I have heard, but also that it's just trying to center white beauty standards, which we don't need. Also, I feel like it's problematic that like the only like the main girl who is a black girl, which is Zendaya, Rue, is her name Rue in the story? Or am I getting that from someone else? Something else. That she has substance use, a substance use disorder, and comes from a broken family. And then I'm like, okay, so we're just like generalizing people. Our child is Stuart. Ugh. How did that happen? No. Twitch censored my name. Incestuous bestiality. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Is Hunter Schafer in this season? Yes. I do like Hunter Schafer. I think Hunter Schafer is a great actor. Also has been outspoken about like Palestinian liberation. I mean, as well as Zendaya, so like that's cool. But yeah. All of these people are just very, very skinny. And especially in this moment where there's just ever growing fat phobia and like decentering of any sort of diversity with beauty standards, it also like makes me sad and like seeing like I don't know what she's been doing or like the issues of like speculating about people's appearances of like Alexa Demi, but like she looks so much skinnier than these other seasons, and how it's like, okay, so just everyone has to look this way. This is just part of the sort of like sameness, conforming of fascism that I feel like is ever present. So yeah, I like Hunter Schafer. There is apparently this like really weird scene where this guy is well, they're on a date, Hunter's character and this guy that she's dating, and he's talking about like, "Oh, so like your skin is so smooth because you never went through puberty as a trans woman." And she's like, "Oh, you're right." And like flattered by it. I'm like, this is weird. This is a weird situation. And trans people do go through puberty. Ask anyone who is on hormones. Anyway, that's my perspective. All of these takes that no one asked for. But there you go. Okay. Let's return to this podcast episode. We have about 5 minutes left, and then we will get back into the headlines. Or I guess get into the headlines, because we weren't getting into them before. But anyway.
I'd found our second season. Hey, true crime fans. Tired of just listening to your favorite podcasters solve murder mysteries? Ever wish you could get in on the action? Well, now you can with Gore Club. Sign up now, and each month we'll send you a victim's body parts from an unsolved murder for you to investigate.
Oh.
Run DNA tests, look at them through a magnifying glass, or just play around with them. But remember, time is of the essence. There's a killer on the loose. Start piecing together clues today for just $8 a month.
The thing is, that's funny about this concept of like if people were selling evidence as part of a podcast like scheme to make money, that would do very well. People would be all over that shit. I've never even seen that show. What is it about? Euphoria. Yes, it's essentially about high school drama, especially like high school relationships and like their sex lives, which I also take issue with that in like it makes me uncomfortable where there is just like a ton of shows about minors and their sex lives. Like obviously the actors are not minors, but there's this eroticizing continually happening, particularly of young women, and portraying like adult men like getting off on like these sex scenes with minors in them. Like that is most likely happening and like deeply uncomfortable for me in many aspects, especially when it comes to like Sydney Sweeney. And there was, let's see, there have been a number of creators talking about this with Euphoria. Let's see. Yeah, I think we may watch this for Culture Corner sometime. Euphoria is beautifully misogynistic. Yeah, it's really all about the women, the girls in it, really only finding worth through their physical appearances, which can be a commentary on, you know, like the commodification of beauty and such. But see, like looking at stuff like this, I'm like, you are not a pet player in real life. Um, yeah, Rue. It's like also it's one thing if we were talking about, which they do delve into a little bit at the beginning of Rue experiencing more marginalization and how that can be like a traumatic event. And when people are experiencing this kind of trauma through marginalization, they can be more likely to develop substance use disorders as a way to cope. But also that like none of the other characters are dealing with this. It just is like very racialized in many ways. Um, the outfits are cool, but also like no one would ever be able to wear this in high school. And that kind of shit pisses me off. I'm like, oh, so you get to look cute for this show, but like we had to wear boring things in school. Um, okay. This is just an example. I really like his stuff, this creator. Just like the dynamics of Euphoria.
So do y'all not carry around like backpacks or pencils, anything? Y'all don't be learning? Hey, you thirsty? Oh, sure, thanks. Is this vodka? Bro, where were you last night? Y'all were serious about a party on a Monday night? Your parents let you go out past 9 on a school night? My mom don't play that. And then she said,
Yeah, they never do homework. They're never doing schoolwork. They're never like the extracurriculars are really only to like help keep the plot going, like theater specifically, and like sports, like being a sports guy. But yeah, all of the like ways that there are like these low cut shirts and like I mean that would be fun. That would be fun if like people were allowed to dress in that way to like have self-expression, but and like showing midriffs and stuff. That would be more of a decolonized way specifically to be looking at fashion. But like that's just not a thing. And so like this is just some like weird fantasy world.
Cassie, can I ask you something? I knew it was downhill from there. Ew, is there pee on the floor?
I am who I am.
What does that even mean?
Who was that in the back with her boobies out?
Oh, it's alright, that's Maddie. Honestly, everybody dressed like
Move, monkey.
Yo, Nate,
Yep.
Watch out. It might be my first day, but I've heard some things about your family.
I will hurt you!
On second thought, I have heard a thing.
McKay, is that you?
Are you kidding me?
What?
I know there's not a lot of us here, but you know I don't look... Get out my face. I wonder what
Yep.
this disc is for.
Wider. Wider.
Hey, Rue.
Hey.
Good? Staying clean?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Mom, just come pick me up! So do y'all not carry around...
Yeah, where she's like one of the few black characters in the show and like just constantly on drugs. That's problematic. But yeah, look at these comments. Euphoria High is straight up a mental institution more than it is a school. Euphoria makes more sense as a college series in a university setting. I have no idea why the producers and writers thought it was a good idea to have it set in high school. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, and that honestly is Lexi is the only person I've ever seen touching a book in that show. Talk about it. Because that, like me as like being like a very concerned student in high school, I'm like, do none of these people give a fuck? I mean, that can be real in high school, but yeah, it made no sense for that show to be set in high school. They were never in class, which honestly, that makes it seem like it was all just about like fetishizing minors, and that's really concerning. I don't need to watch this show. Yeah, and it also, from what I've heard, is Israeli propaganda. There's this other creator talking about it that I'll show you real quick.
Did you know that Euphoria is actually an Israeli TV show?
We watched this on a different stream, but also
the idea, the
it's
Israeli
good to
creators
go
actually
over.
stayed on as executive producers for the American adaptation. Then Sam Levinson was brought in, and that team made the show what it is today. Sam Levinson, for his part, is a staunch supporter of Israel. He's the son of Academy Award-winning filmmaker Barry Levinson, who himself is a strong supporter of Israel. And in October of 2023, Sam Levinson quickly mobilized to sign the Creative Community for Peace open letter supporting Israel, and to raise funds for several organizations connected to the Israeli military. Some cast members have publicly advocated for Palestine, like Hunter Schafer, who was arrested at a pro-Palestine protest in 2024. Other cast members, like Sydney Sweeney, for instance, has aligned herself with Israel. In January 2026, she met with 2 of the hostages from October 7th. In a visit coordinated by the pro-Israel lobby group.
Yeah, gross. Fuck you, bitch. It also, like, her boyfriend is abysmal too. It's just a monster. It's like just going from like gross partner to gross partner after another. But also it's not an accident that she is given the most screen time, and where it's like centering her white centric beauty standards, Eurocentric beauty standards, but also like politically that she is aligned more with the Israeli project and also the fascism of MAGA and all of that going on in the country.
And with us. She's also currently dating Scooter Braun, who's been one of the entertainment industry's most vocal celebrity supporters of Israel. It's also interesting to me that this season they're promoting another organization with blue and white colors, because that organization's billionaire owner was the biggest donor to AIPAC in 2023. Did you already know this about Euphoria? Are you watching the show? Let me know in the comments and follow for more like this. Did you know that Euphoria is actually an Israeli
Yeah, there also is this short that I saw where it's talking about how it isn't an original
Did you know
idea.
Euphoria isn't even original? It's actually based on a 2012 Israeli show with the same name that got cancelled after 1 season. The original was pretty controversial when it aired because of the way it portrayed teenagers in adult scenarios. Does that sound familiar? Sam Levinson, the creator of the American Euphoria, said in an interview that he rewrote the Israeli version using his own life experiences, almost seeing himself as Rue. He also said he didn't think of it as a high school show because he didn't go to high school. Euphoria has been celebrated for being
He's saying it's not a high school show because he didn't go to high school? What? So that means you're given carte blanche to sexualize minors as much as you want? It's concerning. Hello, St. Topaz. Welcome. How are you doing? Impossible to trust someone named Scooter. Yeah, especially a white person named Scooter, where it's like, your parents gave you this wasn't a nickname that was just like bestowed upon you. This was like, this is your government name. Why?
A raw depiction of youth struggles in a way that's reminiscent of shows like Skins. But it's also been very controversial. Season 3 just came out and it currently has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 44%. Critics have called it exploitative, dehumanizing, and misogynistic. And with the original aesthetic and soundtrack abandoned, people aren't super happy. But critics have only seen the first 3 episodes and we've only seen 1, so there's still time for it to turn around. But what do you think of season 3? Did you know Euphoria isn't even original? It's actually based on a 2012 Israeli show with the same name.
You're doing all right? I'm doing okay, hanging in there. Just keeping on, I guess. There was someone else that was talking about like the weird. Okay, I like a lot of her commentary.
My daughter still goes, Mommy, can we go on our plane again? And I'm like, baby,
Can we watch what happens to everyone?
there's no plane. My daughter still goes, Mommy, can we go on our plane again? And I'm like, baby, there's no plane.
I don't know what that means. But there you go. What are we watching today? Well, we're watching some content that is describing your euphoria, and I agree with that concept of it did shape a generation of, especially with fashion, but a lot of the people who actually shaped the aesthetics did not give credit to it. So we're briefly talking about that. shows on HBO, if you will. Not if you will. We were talking about shows on HBO that are actually worth watching. If there are any shows that you like that you have seen lately, any good recommendations, feel free to share. I haven't seen Euphoria. That's okay. You don't need to. I do think there has been some good acting in it, but also I don't like the fact that it is Israeli propaganda in many aspects. So, gonna name my next kid Razor. Yeah, like, from what I've heard of the dude, there's like nothing that sounds redeeming about him either. So there you go. And from what I have gathered with Sydney Sweeney, not much about her either. So there you go. And now apparently there are people who are MAGA that are transvestigating Sydney Sweeney. They're like, well, her neck's kind of big. Is too big. Is she trans? Of course, they're not using like humanizing terms. They're using a lot of slurs when talking about her. And it just goes to show how like all of this transphobia like largely is based in misogyny, where misogyny upholds patriarchy and strict gender binaries to uphold patriarchy as well, where like if we actually lived in a more gender expansive, inclusive world, that this would be a non-issue, that people would not be talking about it. I thought conservatives loved Sydney Sweeney. Well, they did, but also like it just goes to show how fascism has progressed, where it's like Erica Kirk and Sydney Sweeney, some of the darlings, the blue-eyed, blonde-haired darlings of white supremacy, are being transvestigated. It's especially when like we are seeing even more of these policies get more discriminatory, that there is even more of a rise in misogyny and hating women, that it's not an accident that people in the fascist administration that have been kicked out, that have been fired, who have left, that they have been women. Especially when it comes to these women, when they're afraid that they're getting too much power, that a lot of this can be used to like put them in their place or whatever the fuck. Because that is like a hallmark of patriarchy, is just tokenizing people or like commodifying especially femaleness and women in order to assert male domination. That is non-consensual. So yeah, it's essentially to make it so they can still control the narrative. And especially as they are running out of enemies, essentially they're like, oh yeah, so we're doing this to hurt immigrants. Now we've done that. We're doing this to take away the right of like reproductive freedom from women, and to like hurt trans people and stuff, that it's only going to get like their little party, their faction is only going to get smaller and smaller as like to who is in the in crowd. And that is just how fascism works, is that they eat their own, because they always have to have a group that they are beating down in order to maintain power. So there is that. But before we got into more of the Euphoria discussion, we were listening to this podcast, this satire, the satirical podcast, fake podcast by The Onion, and they had a whole season about a very fatal murder, as if there's another kind of murder. And we have been watching that on the stream. This is a whole new drop of a season that came out today, which I will restate. I'm like, why aren't you like spreading this out over time to like make your content last longer? But, you know, they're not caring about that. And I can appreciate that as well. So the previous season in this fake podcast, there was AI that essentially instructed all of these unpaid interns to go and kill someone to create the perfect murder to create a podcast on, which sadly is like maybe closer to real life than what we all want to admit. Also, in order to like test to see what like type of like murder methods were used. They like murdered an intern, an unpaid intern, and that also was like not that far from real life, but also great commentary on what's happening in society. And with this one, the podcast host moved to LA, and so he is trying to find a perfect murder there, and is just like dismissing all of these various cases because it's not hitting on all of these aspects he wants to create commentary on. Sydney Sweeney has never denied the white supremacy allegations, nor has she shut down and denounced that whole rhetoric. I know, exactly. So you would think that they would be like, oh, yay, we like her even more. But like, you can't, this is why it like goes to show like discrimination hurts everyone. There are still people that are like, who are fascist and MAGA that are like, she's the ideal, we love her because she's MAGA. But also like, that doesn't mean that people who are subscribing to this ideology aren't also going to be hurt by it, because it is inherently trying to create these hierarchies of human dignity where women are oppressed, even if they benefit from proximity to whiteness and having Eurocentric beauty standards. That's like, if they are getting too much attention for things, especially someone like Erica Kirk, if they are seeming to like have more power than what they are comfortable with, people are going to try to put them in their place. And like, even if they don't have that much power, it's just about like having control and making sure that like women are viewed as secondary to men. That like, that also is an enormous factor in conservatism largely, but also fascism. Fascism and racial supremacy benefits no one in the long run, but Sydney has cultivated a fan base around that. Exactly. And so it's like, how can you expect it to not come back to you ever? Like, you have benefited from it for so long that like, that can't last. Like, you don't truly have like a solid foundation of support when it is based off of like stepping on other people. That like, once the ground shifts underneath you and there aren't enough people for these people to be hating all the time, especially with like fascism constantly eating their own and being like, okay, so now that like this is happening with immigrants and we're putting them in concentration camps, who else can we put in concentration camps? It's like, and they expand the ways that they are discriminating against people. Like, it's just more out in the open. But yeah, it's like people who are cultivating this type of fan base, cultivating this type of ideology that they're supporting, it is very delusional for them to think that it won't come around to them, which is why I have said before that like Candace Owens, she's one of the biggest leaders when it comes to like transvestigations of like saying that like there are cis women who are trans, which also like, who gives a fuck, who cares? But it also is this way to get clicks and further exacerbate and capitalize these types of bigotry. And especially as a Black woman, where Black women historically have been eroticized against their will, but also been subjected to a lot of transphobic remarks, whether they're trans or not. And so I'm like, she's playing with fire with this. I mean, any person who is engaging in this, who, if you're part of a marginalized community whatsoever, or experience oppression whatsoever, it's like, you can only benefit for so long unless you're at the very, very top. And even then, it's going to eat you, because that's how this works. Exactly. Fascism needs an enemy to survive. It's not sustainable. Yep. And that's what people are experiencing. Once they start feeling like the fuel of their hatred is not being fed quite as much, they'll just keep trying to find enemies, and it will be within their own ranks, because that's just how it works. They start running out of people. So, good conversation, y'all. Getting back to this podcast episode, He is essentially like, he actually hired a person this time around, wasn't just using AI. And the AI is now that like orchestrated this murder in the previous season. The AI is in jail, which that's a joke. That would never happen. So that in and of itself is satire, not because like AI can't be put in jail, but the fact that people would even want to be put in jail, and there were restraints around AI. But he is not in jail. So like that is also much more true to life. But there you go. He actually has like a personal assistant because he is now in LA. He doesn't have interns as much. He has a personal assistant that he's hiring to find the perfect murder, and he's like, I'm just not listening to her. And so that's where we are so far.
Gore Club. So fun. It's gory. Milo Reed, a man who, on paper, had no reason to murder. Born in Switzerland, he claims to have extracted himself from his mother's womb before being immediately hailed an infant visionary. When he was 16, he was one of the minds behind the revolutionary social network NowTalk, and since then he's gone on to found the multi-pronged tech company Terrain. Milo has innovated his way to billions of dollars and disrupted industries like space travel, cars, computers, mosquitoes, cryptocurrency, blood, and more. But did he also disrupt a life? Forever.
Mosquitoes and
Milo
blood.
Reed was arrested by the Los Angeles Police Department at 9 a.m. in the infidelity wing of his compound. Friends and employees claim he and his wife Liana had been fighting for months, and multiple eyewitnesses had identified him fleeing the scene mere minutes before her body was found, though he publicly denied the charges.
I did not kill my wife.
But that didn't explain the evidence against him.
The
police say Milo was high on a
That
custom
was his
drug
public
concoction the morning
declaration.
of the murder.
I did
3
not
months
kill my
earlier, He
wife.
had filed a patent application for a VR-controlled strangulation drone that matched the one police believed to be the murder weapon. The perpetrator had also spit on the corpse afterward, which forensics matched to Milo's DNA.
Several eyewitnesses positively identified
Getting a drone, a strangulation drone. That is some capitalist shit.
Mr. Reed as being at the scene the night of the murder, including one of his
I'm beginning
domestic
to think
servants
he
and
didn't
a
kill his
contract
wife. I
employee who was
know.
delivering an Atlantic white-spotted
It's a tricky
octopus
case.
for either Mr. Reed's personal aquarium or sushi bar.
This is LAPD Lieutenant Mike McCarthy, the lead investigator on Milo Reed's case, reading off the charges against Milo at a press conference.
Mr. Reed is being charged with first-degree murder, human trafficking, jaywalking, violating the Brentwood Homeowners Association ban on premeditated homicide, and the possession of a woman's corpse without a license.
Cash, yes, Meredith stolen. Host of things that happen at night available wherever you get your podcasts. Would you say this murder exposes how American society infantilizes rich men by lying?
Well, if he had had a license, would have it been considered murder? Would have it been considered immoral?
Recognizing them well past the point of reason, and also how action on climate change is desperately needed?
Sure.
And right away, there they were, other podcasters. Ever since the success of my first season, true crime podcasts have been popping up everywhere. And unlike in Bluff Springs, where as police chief
Yes,
I could
it
arrest
is the
anyone I wanted
Onion.
without interference, I couldn't do anything about it here. But I guess that's the price you pay for setting the trends. I knew right away this was my story, but to cut through the noise of all these wannabe imposters, I knew I'd have to tell it bigger and better. Last season, I set out to tell a story no one had told before.
Also, like, the sociopathy and, like, pridefulness to be like, ever since the success of my podcast, there were so many other podcasts. That's like, okay, you aren't the only one, dude.
But this time, I knew the key to success would be to talk about the same thing as everyone else, but louder. I knew a story about some little dead girl in the middle of nowhere just wasn't going to cut it. This case had everything a second season needed.
A little dead
crazed
girl is
billionaire,
crazy.
American innovation, marital problems. Plus, the victim and suspect were both famous before the murder even happened, which was perfect. The case had buzz. Everyone was talking about it.
It's already
Perfect.
being called the trial of the century.
Trial of the century.
It's the trial of the millennium.
The first murder ever to be tried on Mars.
Prosecutors say this trial shouldn't take more than a day.
Milo Reed.
Milo Reed.
Milo Reed.
Milo Reed.
What makes a man kill his wife like that? I wouldn't know, I'm an ally. But I needed to find out. I needed to get inside the head of a murderer and the court system that might let him walk free. This isn't about who did it.
Definitely
it's about
something
why
the Onion
and
would
what
say.
happens after.
Yeah, all of
and some
it.
other things too.
I wouldn't know. I'm an
So then,
ally.
what makes a second season? It's the story of the Los Angeles County court system, the story of America in the 21st century, and me recording every last detail.
And me.
Coming up this season on A Very Fatal Murder.
Sir, you can't record yourself in here.
Oh my god! The bailiff has a gun!
You're that girl murderer!
Oh my god, was that the big one? Visit our website, opr.org, for exclusive web content like my screenplay and let me know what you think. A Very Fatal Murder is brought to you by me, David Pascal, and Onion Public Radio.
I can't be racist.
This podcast was
yeah,
made possible
exactly.
by Capitol Records, Stan
The more you
Stillitz,
have
and the
to,
Los Angeles Department of
the more
Transportation.
you are calling yourself like an ally, or like the more you have to say that like you aren't bigoted in one particular way, like, you know, that's a very large red flag.
Special thanks for this episode to Milo Reed for killing his wife, and as always, thanks to my own wife and daughters back in Bluff Springs. Miss you guys.
Thank you for killing his wife.
You've just heard The Onion's award-winning journalism. Now hold it in your hands. Subscribe today and receive 12 monthly newspapers delivered straight to your mailbox. It's like a podcast episode you can read. You can read, right? Go to membership.theonion.com to find out now.
There we go. That was the first episode. Now we have plenty to be watching for the beginning of streams. So I'm grateful. Also glad for a laugh. The social commentary. I like when it can be related, like the funny things we're watching. Sometimes it's nice to just like get our minds off of things and watch something that's lighthearted, but also if it can be related to some of the things that we're talking about, like oppressive systems and the society that we are all living in and how we are trying to move within it, who is controlling things and such. Capitalists, surprise, surprise. So if you aren't a bigot, all you gotta do is not be a bigot. You wouldn't go around proving how much you're not a bigot. Yeah, it's like the people who are constantly doing that, they have a lot to unpack. Where it's like, okay, why do you feel the need to be announcing this, to be telling everyone this is concerning? Thank you. These are just some like tabs, soda tabs, beer tabs that I have found. And I put them on some earrings. I used to have many more on this particular hoop, and it was too many. It was like pulling my earlobe down a lot that I was like, oh, that's probably not great. These earrings are little knives, and in cursive it says "killing it" on them. And I think that's fun. Okay, let's get to the news. So let's see what Amy Goodman has to say on Democracy Now! With top headlines for today. I have not seen this coverage today yet, so.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Iran and Israel exchanged fire overnight in the most serious escalation of fighting since a U.S.-Iranian so-called truce was declared in April. Just this morning, Iran said it's halting its attacks on Israel, saying, quote, if the aggressions and acts of mischief continue, including in southern Lebanon, much more severe and crushing actions than before will follow, unquote.
This is really important, this aspect, and one of the main things clearly that I wanted to be talking about today of like major world events that are going on, especially as it pertains to US imperialism and unconscionable violence, that this global superpower is being challenged by Iran, and they're doing a really great job at it, honestly. Like, they shouldn't have to be put in this position to begin with. That Lebanon should not be put in this position, that all of these places receiving the violence of U.S. and Israeli Israeli expansion and imperialism, that shouldn't be a thing to begin with. But this is important. The fact that Iran, they are holding their ground and saying, like, no, you violated this ceasefire, as Israel has done time and time again, as the US has done with a whole long history of doing this over and over again, really since the inception of the terrorist nation state of the United States of America, and breaking treaties all the time, where we are seeing how Iran, they are able to respond to what is happening in ways that other types of people or military forces on the receiving end of this imperialist violence have not been able to, and that they have a much more robust military power, and that their leadership is built in a way to withstand this kind of stuff. US imperialism has been challenged since Vietnam. Yeah, I think so, at least like in a more visible way. Imperialism has always been challenged when it comes to like the expansionist projects by the US government, by indigenous people in America, like in the Americas in general, especially when it comes to all of this interference in Latin America, in South America, Central America, all of these countries where like they may not have been able to withstand as much of the interference, but there have always been challenges to it. So I guess it kind of depends on like what we're defining as challenging, and if it is being more visible in the way that it is resisting what is going on too.
Earlier, Iran had launched a wave
or at
of
least like
missiles at
seen
northern Israel,
among
claiming
the
it
larger
was in
public.
response to Israeli attacks near Beirut on Sunday. Israel responded with attacks on Iran, with explosions reported in
Neo-colonial
Tehran, Tabriz, and Isfahan.
colonialism bits
The
are
Israeli
going
army
great.
also
Yeah,
confirmed
because
it
it's
struck a
the US still
petrochemical
is
plant in Mashhad.
dictating
Israel
what's
attacked
happening
Iran,
with global
despite
capitalism
President Trump
largely.
telling Axios News on Sunday he planned to call Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, especially when we're talking about like military imperialism and might, that like the US has not been winning many military conflicts. Like what you were saying, which I'm guessing is what like you're referring to, is with Vietnam, and showing that like the US entered Vietnam, started this war based on a lie, and was not able to come out and be a victor. It's like, because people who are being invaded, people who are on the receiving end of this violence, have a lot to fight for, which is far more meaningful than just capitalist gain, whatever that means. It is and like resource extraction, that people actually care about their fellow human beings, their families, their neighbors, their loved ones, and the land that they live in. And we are seeing how like this is why like the genocidal Israeli government, they just keep hoping and trying to get Palestinian people to just leave and give up. And it's like, no, this is people's home. This is where their history is. This is where their families are. Like, when you are indigenous to a place, like, your identity and history cannot be separated from the land itself. And that, like, no matter what kind of violence is going on, that, like, people are tied to the land. And especially when there has been so much loss and human suffering, human lives that have been taken just on an unconscionable scale. I mean, like, any sort of loss is unconscionable, but how it's like, it's not just about like, oh, we have to make it so people just are suffering enough that they give up. Like, it doesn't work like that, because people are wanting, and it is necessary for the continuation of identity, especially when it comes to indigenous identity, to maintain these types of sites that people live in, their homeland, and the land that cannot be separated from history. It's just that US imperialism isn't working, but the world is becoming multipolar. This is not the post-World War II world order of US dominance. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And how like the US was able to even maintain or like gain more dominance to like the place that it was after World War II because of entering World War II at such a late date. And how there was all of this industrialization that capitalists were able to make a lot of money on, that it created a lot of jobs. But we see how it was never about like creating more jobs for people in the working class, even in the US, because like right after that, like when women were forced to, well, during World War II, when women were forced to work in factories in order to like provide for their families, or other types of marginalized people where they were actually given more opportunities to work, that when it all ended, that like with aspects of the New Deal and so-called socialist programs like the GI Bill, that it really only affected white veterans and their families, and it was for men, in order to go back to this type of patriarchal, cis-het, white supremacist dominance that existed beforehand.
Urge him not to respond to the first wave of Iranian missiles. President Trump also told the Financial Times Netanyahu had no choice but to accept a deal with Iran, saying, quote, "I call all the shots. He doesn't call the shots," Trump said. This morning, President Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, "Israel and Iran must immediately stop shooting," unquote. This after the Pentagon's DI.
Hello, Getri Beesend. Did I say that right? Do you have a preferred like shorthand or nickname, or is that okay? Saying the full thing? Just let me know what you prefer. 40 years ago, you see Russia and communism as pure evil. Now this crazy orange from the EU, Europe perspective, it's crazy. Yeah, it's really interesting as well, because like, and it belies the fact that the US, being overtly capitalist, it has always been closer to fascism than it has been to any sort of leftist leaning movement like communism. And that like how many people say fascism is late stage capitalism, that it just goes hand in hand, and that like with the US doing what it's doing without any sort of meaningful restraints and restrictions be put on capitalists in their expansion, that it means that it will continue into fascism and late stage fascism until it just eats itself, or until we stop it, which a lot of the time fascists don't stop until there is like military interference. That's just like the truth of it. And I know that's like a very sobering fact, but especially with everything that's going on, where people think like just putting Democrats into office within the US in electoral politics, that they're like, why aren't they acting in a certain way? It's like, yeah, because the whole system is part of this fascist system. So we're having that conversation more lately about electoralism, what can be done through electoralism or not, that it shouldn't be looked as a saving mechanism, but that there can be effects of our material conditions with electoralism, that we still need to engage with it, but also like outside pressure is most important. The New Deal is as socialist as the US has been. Yeah, exactly. And that's something that we've been talking about lately as well, especially in this book. Please hold. Ew, I also hate that we're stopped on that fucker's face. This is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, where they talk directly about a lot of these so-called socialist programs, that they were specifically excluding Black people in America, that they surprisingly had some indigenous programs, but that they were segregated. So like all of these different levels of what it means to be like benefiting people and like who is actually benefiting, and that it is implemented to maintain the system of capitalism rather than a good faith attempt to improve the conditions of people. It's so that people don't revolt, essentially. Say as you can. Sasha is my first name, if you would remember. I'll remember. I have a decent memory. Hopefully. We have to rearm ourselves. Okay, we do it. We do it ourselves. This was not well thought out. Now we ban all U.S. concerns, meaning in Russia. Yeah, it's... My last visit was a long time ago. To the U.S.? Or to Russia? Just to make sure I'm understanding. But yeah, it's like, I mean, the concept of like arming ourselves, like that is, you know, very nuanced, and a lot of people don't want to acknowledge the nuance, especially when it comes to like how often like gun violence is a thing in the US and how much unnecessary death happens because of it, but also acknowledging the fact that any sort of like gun laws and what am I looking for? This word. It's escaping me. But any sort of like restrictions on like owning arms and stuff, that these types of laws have largely been disproportionately applied to marginalized communities, and that there is this concept of gun control. That's what I'm looking for. That gun control largely has been espoused, and like these measures have been sought by white capitalists who are looking to suppress people, that there is this aspect of gun control even coming about in order to suppress people who were enslaved, that Black Americans who were enslaved, Native Americans who were enslaved as well, that there were these larger efforts trying to deter people from owning any sort of guns, and how like most of these laws disproportionately target and are disproportionately enforced for people who are part of marginalized communities. So people of color, people who are disabled, queer people, that it just like keeps perpetuating these same systems. So like how will it actually be implemented? And yeah, I don't have all the answers, clearly, but I do think it's good to be discussing. Sometimes these policies can be truly altruistic and not entirely about keeping the working class contained. Okay, that's what I was guessing. But then when you said we're talking about Russia, I probably just like put that on to you. That also, I'm like, are people in Russia even able to access Twitch, really? I don't know. This is probably showing my American ignorance. Because I was like, that name looks more German than it does Russian, for sure. In beautiful Europe. Last time... Yeah, exactly. Just like the difference between like all of this gun violence in schools. And it goes to show as well, it is shocking, and it should be shocking to all of us. I think it shocks many Americans, but many people, because like there isn't any meaningful action that is taken, people just feel helpless. In Russia, Sasha is short for Alexander. Really? I didn't know that. So what the German, Sasha. Very cool. Yeah, it should be unacceptable to all of us, but also like addressing the fact that the US like from the beginning was, and I mean like many colonizers, like they're the very essence of what it means to have like a nation state and creating borders is a violent process, and that like colonizers are constantly using violent means to assert this kind of dominance and establish control. But like particularly when it comes to the US, of like it being like the whole idea of the United States of America, the colonies, like it was about settler colonialism, and that this was an extremely violent process and is like still continuing to this day, which is why we see a lot of these tactics still stay the same, and why there is this idea of the people who are colonizers, who are still colonizers in these positions of power, why they are wanting to disempower people who can resist in any sort of meaningful way. So they are trying to take away the votes of people, trying to constantly like rig these electoral maps. And so they actually believe in electoralism in a lot of ways, but also like making sure that like only certain people are armed and that other kinds of people have a harder time being armed, and like making it so it's harder to just be out and about in public life. Like I'm a non-binary trans queer person, and that like having worked for the state government in Utah where I'm located, that there were laws dictating where I could or couldn't go to the bathroom, that I often would not just go at work all day because it there were these like penalties and fines and like tip lines that could be applied or people could access to prevent me from actually like being a human being. And you're just subject to everyone's perceptions of who you should be and how they are wanting to impose like masculinity or femininity on people. And if you don't fall neatly in these categories, you're just like constantly being demonized in one way or another. That I know that like non-binary people experience within this gender binary, but especially when it comes to trans people. And this is, again, as we were talking about before, like transvestigating people, like this hurts everyone, because then everyone is under scrutiny if you don't fall neatly into these categories of masculinity and femininity, whatever these fucking mean, these concepts mean, that they are always these constantly moving goalposts rather than like being these set definitions, because it's all about control so that they can still capitalize and impose their dominance off of what these definitions are. I used to have a lot of Russian friends. All of their moms would say that's short for Alexander. You're like, okay, I get it. Colonialism and the creation of the nation state was a brutal process for many, but nationalism has been a lifesaver for many nations, especially post-colonial nations, to form a national identity. Yeah, it can be. It can be. I think especially out of, sometimes it can be out of a reaction to colonialism and colonization, where it's like, okay, we need to do this in order to protect ourselves. But also the idea of like nations, that it can create this concept of like, oh, we like just in this particular area, we have more in common with each other than we do over like a larger expansive geographical area. Like how, like just thinking about like Southeast Asia in particular, like thinking about the difference between like I'm Indian, but also having Desi culture of like, there are a lot of things that we all have in common of like eating biryani and engaging in, I mean like so many different aspects of like design and art and culture that we have as similar. But then when we get these actors and nation states that are like, oh, we don't want certain kinds of people here, and they then use the vehicle of the nation state to impose their own types of domination or to exclude certain kinds of people. You have to move to Berlin. I've never been to Berlin, but I do hear that the nightlife there is really fun. You can speak English. I mean, I would need that. I only know like a little bit of French, like barely any French. I know an abysmal amount of Danish because I'm also Danish. And so this is a hallmark of what it means to be American as well, or growing up within like a colonized sensibility, like especially like in very white spaces. Nationalism was a big part of the many independence movements across the world. Yeah, I think it's like what you were saying. It's just good to keep in perspective that like that type of nationalism wouldn't be necessary if there wasn't the originating cause of colonialism and colonization. Like thinking of like, as like I remember you saying Saint Topaz, like India, of like this Indian nationalism that was a huge aspect in overthrowing British rule, but also considering the fact that like Mohandas Gandhi, who often is referred to as like in these mythic terms of being a legend, it's like, yes, he stood for some important things, but also like this type of nationalism, I think, made him short-sighted when it came to more of a collective struggle in many other places. Like, for instance, like him having very deep like anti-Black tendencies of not seeing the shared struggle with apartheid South Africa, even the way he would talk about people resisting Nazi rule in like a very in like very problematic terms of just saying that like people needed to be more nonviolent and that they would get there. And it's like, okay, that's not always the answer, but there you go. Is demonized today because of what it can lead to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and fascism, where it's like, yeah, where the fascism of World War II, but also like the nationalism that existed to justify colonization of these colonizers, to be like, oh, like we love Spain and everyone should love Spain. So we're going to impose Spanish language and Catholicism on all of these different countries and genocide people to extract their resources as well, where it's like there's also that aspect too. But that nationalism can be developed as a way to resist the nationalism of colonizers. But that doesn't mean that nationalism still can't be co-opted by bad actors in these places where it originally started out as a resistance movement and can be used to impose their own kinds of discrimination or domination that people are not agreeing to. Okay. Speaking of fascism, I want to get this fucker's face off the screen. Shall we continue? But I love the conversation. Keep it going.
The Defense Intelligence Agency recently raised
I'm also
the
going to speed this up just a little
threat
bit.
assessment for Israel to critical. Amidst growing concerns, Israeli spy agencies are eavesdropping on American negotiators working on a ceasefire deal with Iran. Israeli airstrikes hit Beirut's suburbs on Sunday, despite a U.S. brokered ceasefire that was renewed just days earlier. On Saturday, Israeli attacks across southern Lebanon killed at least 10 people, including a brigadier general, a captain, and a Lebanese soldier. Since March, Israeli attacks have killed more than 3,500 people and displaced over a fifth of Lebanon's population. In Gaza, at least 7 Palestinians were killed and 15 others injured on Saturday when Israel's military bombed a large tent encampment in the heart of Gaza City. Children were among the dead and wounded. On Sunday, an Israeli strike on a police station and a vehicle killed at least 9 people and wounded 20 others. The attacks come despite last October's U.S. brokered ceasefire. Since then, Israeli attacks have killed about 950 Palestinians. This is Abdul Salam Judah, the uncle of a Palestinian killed in an Israeli strike over the weekend.
We are ordinary citizens. We are looking for and asking for peace. We are neither calling for war nor destruction nor anything else. We are people who believe in a just peace.
In Ukraine, a Russian drone struck a nuclear fuel storage facility inside the Chernobyl exclusion zone Sunday, heavily damaging
Just
a fuel
the continued evil of trying to justify all of these violent actions. I won't stop if anyone is annoyed. I mean, I'm not annoyed.
building close to where large amounts of nuclear material are stored. Ukrainian officials say radiation levels remain within normal range and no injuries were reported. The IAEA called the strike deeply concerning and said inspectors would visit the site. Meanwhile, in the Zaporizhzhia region, Russian-guided bombs hit a public transit stop in Balabin, killing 3 civilians and wounding 3 others. This is the principal of a local school.
A guided bomb was dropped near the education institution. The explosion was very powerful as there were casualties. The school was severely damaged.
In France, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth used a D-Day anniversary ceremony at the American Military Cemetery in Normandy to attack European immigration policy, saying the continent is facing a new invasion.
Sadly, today, different European beaches are stormed by different dangerous ideologies. Beaches in Spain, in Italy, in Greece, and Bulgaria. Boats and men arrive. When will European capitals do something about that invasion? Or is it too late? I pray not, and I believe
People are uncomfortable, as they should be. What a horrible human being. To be using this. I mean, the American military, there's so many issues with this. That was such a reductive thing to say. The American military has been a terrorist organization for as long as it has existed, if we're being honest. But the fact that he is doing this, like, along with every other bullshit action and, like, speech he's given, anything he's said or done has been just completely deplorable. Gandhi held racist views during his time in South Africa, but he grew out of many of his racist views. He truly did inspire an independence movement across British India and non-violently too. Yeah, that's not to minimize that, like, he was able to do some good, especially, like, my family is from Gujarat, and I think I just want to, like, especially with all of the Hindu nationalism that has come from that particular state, especially with, like, the rise of Narendra Modi, like, making sure that, like, we're calling out these different aspects so that, like, we're clear-eyed as we're analyzing the situation now and historically what has led to certain things too. Especially with Gandhi being in Gujarat for a very long time as well. Like, there are all of these, like, monuments and stuff to him, and, like, that's not without reason to, like, resist colonization, but it doesn't mean that, like, it always, like, every type of person was necessarily included in this vision of nationalism, if that makes sense. He directly inspired Nelson Mandela. Yeah, he also inspired Martin Luther King, so, like, Dr. King. But also, I think many of these people grew to see, like, in their own political activism that, like, nonviolence wasn't exclusively a way for liberation. However, while his racist views changed, but his views on caste didn't change. Yeah, exactly. Like, advocating for Dalits. He didn't necessarily, like, let alone indigenous tribes in India. He didn't necessarily impose caste-based hierarchy, but did not want to dismantle the caste system. Exactly. Of just wanting to advocate for ashram and not this equalizing of everybody. Because as we see, when we have these hierarchies of human dignity that have existed before, but especially when colonizers come in and reinforce these hierarchies, it gets even more internalized, particularly with the violent means that they use to do this, that it is very difficult to do all of this deconstructing of not only, like, the systems themselves, but also, like, the decolonization endeavor of trying to decolonize people's minds as well. But I think those are some really great points.
not.
This comes as Pope Leo condemned rising European military spending to its highest level since the end of the Cold War, calling it a betrayal of diplomacy. A federal lawsuit filed Saturday is seeking to block an Ultimate Fighting Championship UFC event scheduled for June 14th on the White House South Lawn, which happens to be President Trump's 80th birthday. The White House is branding the UFC event as part of the United States' 250th anniversary celebrations.
Happens.
The suit, brought by the Public Integrity Project on behalf of the Vietnam
This
War
is
veteran
falling
and civic
empire
activist,
shit.
argues
Like,
the
this
UFC
is what
would financially benefit President Trump and UFC President Dana White
the Roman
through
emperors
promotional
would do
opportunities and stock
to,
holdings.
like,
Lawsuit
with
cites a report that
the
Trump
Colosseum and all of
$50,000 in
these
stock in
gladiator
UFC's parent
fights
company.
to
It also
distract
argues the Trump
from
administration's
their
approval
own falling
violated National
empire
Park
and
Service
corruption.
regulations prohibiting commercial sporting events on specific federal parklands. That Congress did not authorize the construction of a towering
Gandhi
600-ton
advocated
steel arch
for
on the South Lawn,
Dalit
and that no
upliftment, but believed that
environmental
everyone has a
review
place.
was
Yeah,
conducted.
exactly. It's
President Trump
important to
stormed
hold
out of
those
an interview
nuances.
with NBC News' Kristen Welker.
Yeah, it's like I'm glad you're bringing these things up because it just goes to show that it's like, you know, human beings are very complex, but also what it means to have liberation for everyone. This is also a very complex issue. And that, like, especially when it comes to growing up in the heart of US empire, where like nonviolence is taught as like the only means for resisting oppression because it is in the benefit of these power structures, that it means that there has been a lot of myth making. So like the way that Gandhi is talked about in the US, especially with history, like barely talked about at all, but really only talked about in terms of like nonviolent resistance and like hunger strikes. And like that's it. That's really most of what Americans know about Gandhi. And so like breaking down some of this myth making, I think, is important as this larger project of decolonizing even like what it means to have this US empire exist. I have my criticisms of Gandhi, but I tend to back him in online spaces because of the rising Hindu far-right nationalism. Yeah, exactly. So like holding that type of nuance, it's like you can have people from the far right that are criticizing Gandhi because they're like, no, we don't want to eliminate some aspects of caste, you know? But also like there are people who can just be like very racist, like outside of like the Indian subcontinent diaspora that are not familiar with the history. So I think that's also important. Gandhi is many things and in many ways a terrible person, but his contribution to Indian independence is undeniable. Yeah, I agree. I think also, like in addition to talking about Gandhi, is that we need to be talking about other thinkers and like thought leaders, people who are their own revolutionaries like Ambedkar, and discussing like these other people who are not as commonly talked about, that it's like he isn't just the answer, that there are other people also fighting for liberation at the same time. UFC fight in front of White House feels like South Park did there. Yeah, exactly. It just feels like we are living in satire. That's like, it's so hard to satirize this moment because it's so fucking absurd and corrupt, and that like the American people have just had it. Idiocracy. Yeah. And like the American people are so disillusioned with like what actually provides liberation, or like if it's even worth fighting for, what that actually means, like what would be meaningful or actually move the needle. It just is. It's a shit show. But that's something we talk about here. Movie becomes real. Yeah, exactly. Like in a very terrifying way.
Friday, after she questioned him about compensating the January 6th insurrectionists who attacked police, as well as whether he had any evidence for rigged elections. Trump had agreed to record the sit-down interview for Meet the Press ahead of an event in Wisconsin.
Your elections are crooked, and you're crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked, and so is ABC, and CBS, and CNN. You're one-sided crooked networks. Right, let's call it quits, because I've had enough.
In more media news, The 60 Minutes anchor recently fired by CBS News has accused editor-in-chief Barry Weiss of destroying
Fascists are the
coverage to support
biggest
false narratives
babies.
being pushed by the Trump administration.
I need to stop using the term babies because I feel like that's insulting to babies. They can't help being babies. Like, it's not. Fascists are the most like overly sensitive, looking for any type of offense that they can, like, as they call other people, snowflakes. It's like they are the most thin-skinned, like not able to have any sort of pushback. It's like that's the nature of fascism. But yeah, it just is like, you really, like, that weak, you can't actually like listen to other people at all, hold any sort of space, holding space for diverse thought. No, because that's not what fascism is about, but it just engenders this narcissism and this like this inability to have any difference of opinion, which, like, obviously that's the goal, but it just makes it so these people are so cowardly and weak when it comes to having, like, being able to like stand on anything, because they can't stand on principle. I can't say anything about Gandhi. That's okay. I mean, especially in like the Western world, many people are just like not taught about Gandhi, and that's where like I do a lot of breaking down of like the myth making of Gandhi, like what we were talking about Saint Topaz, of like acknowledging his role in independence, but also acknowledging that there are more people like that have come from the Indian subcontinent, from Southeast Asia in general, that are more revolutionary in their thinking when it comes to having equality for everyone too. So like holding all of these nuances is important. Criticism of Gandhi doesn't have to strip him of his merits. Yeah. India being a secular democracy with universal suffrage has in large part to do with Gandhi's insistence. Criticism of Gandhi is often accompanied with replacing the mythification of Gandhi with mythification of right-wing leaders. Yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, especially if there are spaces that are consistently invested in this mythification, where they're trying to tear him down for that. But I do think there are also aspects of like, and important, like what we have been talking about, important criticisms that come from a more leftist perspective of like fighting for the liberation of everyone, not just like certain people in positions in society or caste, and that we can be holding these nuances and should be talking about this, especially when it comes to like breaking down and confronting Hindu nationalism, Hindutva, and wanting to make sure that we are talking about the government now in ways that are realistic and accurate to how it got to this place. South Asia is a region rampant with historical revisionism for modern political agendas. Yes, exactly. And I think that's just an example, like what you were saying, Gandhi, of him, like this happens with like Dr. King in the US, of like every political party being like, oh, we're gonna demonize you for this, or like compliment you for this, but like justifying these like very particular sound bites that are taken out of context to have their own political agendas be reinforced, rather than examining their lives and what they're actually doing, but particularly the more revolutionary aspects of their lives. I think that's the biggest issue that I take, especially in growing up in like, as we have like these different perspectives and like both of our upbringings of like growing up in the US, of Gandhi really only being revered in terms of like kind of this like gross aspect of like it being a good to like have brown bodies be brutalized for peace, rather than and that also is something that like that's used to justify Dr. King's nonviolent resistance, and like having that same aspect of it being good that Black bodies are being brutalized for peace, when there are many different types of revolutionary thought and various leaders where they talk about effective means for liberation that do not necessarily include that. Yeah, exactly. It's like these people are human beings and they're complex. Like Gandhi as well had like some very like sexist opinions on things. But like once again, like these people were human beings and they were complex, and it is good to analyze their complexity rather than minimize them to being like one particular type of ideology, but like examining their lives, the various like movements that they are working through. For what cost? Yeah, it's like Dr. King, especially near the end of his life before he was murdered by the CIA, by the US government, he was becoming much more open to other means of liberation for people, not just talking about equality in civil rights, but talking more about like human rights and there being a distinction there. But like near the end of his life, he was like a lot more radicalized and revolutionary. People that fight haven't good life. I mean, if you are like saying anything that is against a larger colonial project, it's really difficult to not go throughout life without the government and power structures that are against you cutting it short. Like how Dr. King became much more in line with Malcolm X and some other more revolutionary thinkers at the end of his life, that Malcolm X also came to be more aligned with some of the things that Dr. King was advocating for. So like holding that nuance as well of like people's views changing throughout their lives, and that like humans are fallible, they aren't perfect, and that we have to examine all of these aspects. Yeah, that's okay. No worries. I also do not know German, so that's on me. Non-violent movements may have its flaws, but at a time when many post-colonial nations with violent uprisings were turning to authoritarianism and military rule, it might have been the non-violent aspect that made a democratic transition possible. Yeah, I think there is that aspect. I think also like understanding that a lot of the time the authoritarianism and military rule is co-opted by outside forces, a lot of the time colonial forces, a lot of the time like Western colonial forces, to impose and place dictators that are good enemies for them to set up and be like, oh, we have this guy in charge, this person in charge that's super radical, and it's not necessarily what the people who are there, who it affects, like want, but there are all of these different aspects that go into like how we should be analyzing these historical moments.
In an interview with the New York Times, Pelley cited Weiss's intervention in a 60-minute segment on the killing of Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis last January by a masked Border Patrol officer.
Barry Weiss sends an email to my boss, Tanya Simon. Two of the things in the email include, can we make the protesters look more violent? Now, I'm paraphrasing. I don't have the quote, but that's what was communicated to me.
So there's also this aspect as well of like some of the limits of when it comes to like nonviolent protest, which like I've been talking about this a lot more, especially since it's Pride in the US, that there are many people that are like, oh, we like Pride, the whole aspect, the whole origination of Pride came about from people who were being discriminated against, primarily trans people of color, queer people of color, at a bar at Stonewall, where they were being harassed by cops, and that it had been happening for a very long time, since the existence of the US nation, and that they started throwing bricks at cops to defend themselves. And that is what led to cops like actually not having as violent of means of enforcement for a bit. Not to say like that stopped or that they didn't like increase some of their methods, but like that started this larger uniting organizing effort for queer liberation. And that like that story often gets minimized because people are wanting to say like the only way to protest is through like these specific means that are controlled by the state, that you can only have a protest unless it is you have like sanction by the state. And that many people, especially like in this fascist moment that we find ourselves in the US, I mean, this overt fascist moment, that people are thinking that like the more like peaceful protests we have, like we just need to have more of them, like more quantities. And I think that can be important in having more like optics that are pushing back against what's happening. But often that like when people are subject to things like police brutality, when we are engaging with this concept of marginalization and colonization inherently being violent endeavors, that like what do we actually define as violence? And that like when people are being kidnapped and trafficked to concentration camps on US soil in these detainment centers, like that is violence. So like what type of opposition is actually going to fight against this? I know many that fight against Hitler and his regime. They got murdered, killed, locked up, and killed afterwards. Yeah. And so it's like a lot of the time when we're dealing with fascism, like they only respond to certain kinds of resistance, and that they can manipulate some of these movements to then just mow people down and brutalize people as much as possible and be like, you can't fight back. And so it's like, we can't, and this is something that I keep saying, of like, we can't have people who are not currently experiencing these conditions be dictating what is the definition of liberation. That oppressed people are the ones who define what liberation means for themselves. And that, like, I agree with Malcolm X that it should come by any means necessary, because guess what? Like, any and all means have been used to oppress people, and that is not viewed as violence because it is state sanctioned.
And the other thing was Renee Good's car. You need to describe her as driving toward the officer.
New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill has more than doubled New Jersey funding for a program that provides free legal services for low-income immigrants facing deportation. She also announced a rapid legal response initiative that will provide immediate representation to immigrants jailed at Delaney Hall, the GEO Group's for-profit ICE jail in Newark. At least 90 people have been arrested at protests outside Delaney Hall over the past 2 weeks as prisoners inside hold a hunger and labor strike to protest inhumane conditions while demanding their freedom. One letter from a prisoner dated May 31st describes medical neglect, undrinkable water, expired and rancid food, unusable toilets, and poor ventilation. The prisoner writes, quote, "They constantly threaten to deport us, transfer us to punishment units, and move us from one detention center to another. They take photos of us in the dormitories without our consent and tell us that we have no rights here," unquote. Meanwhile, New Jersey prosecutors have charged an Essex County police sergeant with stealing about $10,000 worth of equipment from reporter Angelina Katsanis. The photojournalist dropped her camera bag and had to be hospitalized after she was attacked by police while covering a protest at Delaney Hall in May. In California, 3 prisoners at a for-profit ICE jail in
especially
Adelanto
when
were
we
transferred to
see
solitary
that
confinement after they met last
these entities like law enforcement, the cops, the pigs, that they are allowed to be as violent as possible, that they do not have any sort of meaningful accountability for what they do, that a lot of the time they are rewarded for this type of brutalization. So then what? Where does that put us? And what does it mean to actually fight against these people when they are allowed to have unlimited violence and unlimited brutality against people who are expected to just take it constantly. That can also be a way to make it so people who are resisting, that they don't have as many options for resisting, or that they are easier to oppress. So that's as far as we're getting today with some of the news. I did want to get to the reading today with the Communist Manifesto as we are analyzing it. We are currently in the section Bourgeois and Proletarians, and I don't know if we'll be able to finish it today, but I did want to still get in a little bit. So it is essentially in this section just including the background of this concept of power imbalances and workers being exploited, that capitalists control these means of people creating monetary gain, but how this informs these larger societal structures. Okay. The proletariat goes through various evolutionary stages. Its struggle against the bourgeoisie begins with its birth. At first, it is a struggle of individual workers, then of the workers in one factory, then of the workers of the same trade in one locality against the capitalist who directly exploits them. They do not direct their attacks against the bourgeois mode of production. They direct them against the instruments of production themselves. They destroy foreign competing wares. They break the machines, set fire to factories. They seek to restore by force the lost position of the worker in the Middle Ages. At this stage, the workers form an incoherent mass scattered over the whole country and disunited by competition. When they unite to form more compact bodies, it is not as yet the result of their own union, but the union of the bourgeoisie, which, to gain its own political ends, must set in motion the entire proletariat, and is yet, for a time, able to do so. At this stage, the proletariat does not fight its own enemies, but the enemies of its enemies, the remnants of the absolute monarchy, the landowners, the non-industrial and petty bourgeoisie, or petite bourgeoisie. The whole historical movement is thus concentrated in the hands of the bourgeoisie. Every victory so obtained is a victory for the bourgeoisie. But with the development of industry, the proletariat not only increases in number, it is concentrated in larger masses. Its strength grows, it feels that strength more. It is concentrated in larger masses. Its strength grows, and it feels that strength more. The interests, the life conditions within the proletariat, become always more equalized as machinery more and more obliterates all distinctions of labor and reduces wages almost everywhere to the same low level. With the growing competition among capitalists and the consequent commercial crises, the workers' wages fluctuate more and more. The unceasing improvement of machinery, ever more rapidly developing, makes their whole livelihood increasingly insecure. The collisions between the individual workers and the individual bourgeois take more and more the character of collisions between two classes. The workers begin thereupon to form combinations against the bourgeoisie. They combine together to keep up the rate of wages. They form themselves into permanent associations to provide beforehand before the occasional struggles. Here and there the struggle breaks out into revolt. From time to time, the workers are victorious, but only for a time. The real fruit of their struggle lies not in the immediate result, but in the always growing unity of the workers. Yes, this is aided by the improved means of communication which are created by modern industry, and which bring the workers of different localities into contact with one another. And also, this is calling out how or what we need to highlight in this modern age that we are finding ourselves in, that there is a reason why there are all of these media outlets and platforms that are being bought up and co-opted by capitalists, that they are trying to also eliminate the various ways that people can communicate in a way that is more revolutionary, to inhibit any form of uprising or organization. From time to time, the workers are oh wait, I already read that. This was just the contact required to centralize the numerous local struggles, all of the same character, into a class struggle. Now as we're talking about nationalism, but that it's more effective when it's viewed as a class struggle rather than just a national struggle. Now every class struggle is a political struggle, and the Union, which it took centuries for the burghers of the Middle Ages with their wretched highways to establish, the modern proletariat achieves by means of railways in a few years. This organization of the proletarians into a class, and consequently into a political party, is continually hampered by the competition among the workers themselves. Yes, infighting, also like these hierarchies that are established, and insurgents that come in, especially by like the oppressors and how they're trying to co-opt things. But it always arises again, stronger, firmer, mightier. It compels legislative recognition of particular working class interests by profiting by the divisions within the bourgeoisie itself. For instance, the 10 Hours Bill in England. The collisions between the classes of the old society further in many ways the development of the proletariat. The bourgeoisie finds itself in a perpetual state of warfare, at first with the aristocracy, later with those sections of the bourgeoisie itself whose interests have become antagonistic to the progress of industry, at all times with the bourgeoisie of foreign countries. And as we've seen more globalization, how it essentially has become the same thing, and how there is this melding of classes even more as all of these wage disparities, wealth disparities get larger, that the bourgeoisie also encompasses the aristocracy, and that largely the bourgeoisie has become a type of aristocracy. Oh, this is cute. Cute in the chat. Seeing the localities of people. Okay. In all these battles, it finds itself compelled to appeal to the proletariat, to call for its aid, and thus to draw it into the political arena. It thus provides the proletariat with the elements of social education, i.e., with the weapons to be used against the bourgeoisie itself. Furthermore, as we have seen, by the advance of industry, whole sections of the ruling class are precipitated into the ranks of the proletariat, or their livelihood is at least threatened. They also supply the proletariat with numerous elements of progress. Yeah, so like as we were talking about the New Deal and FDR, that he was part of the bourgeoisie, this ruling class that was giving these little crumbs to people to make it so that they are not revolting in full. Finally, at the moment when the class struggle approaches the decisive hour, the process of disillusion within the ruling class, within the whole of society in fact, takes a character so violent and glaring that a small part of the ruling class cuts itself off and joins the revolutionary class, the class which holds the future in its hands. Yeah, because they're doing it out of self-preservation. They don't want to be killed immediately. Just as formerly a portion of the nobility went over to the bourgeoisie, so now a portion of the bourgeoisie goes over to the proletariat, and particularly that portion of the bourgeois ideologists who have reached a theoretical understanding of the whole historical movement. Of all the classes which stand at present in opposition to the bourgeoisie, the proletariat alone is a revolutionary class. The other, or truly revolutionary class. The other classes decay and go under before modern industry. The proletariat is its special and direct product. The lower middle class, the small manufacturer, the small shopkeeper, the peasant proprietor, all struggle against the bourgeoisie to save from extinction their position as sections of the middle class. They are therefore not revolutionary, but conservative. And what is more, they are reactionary because they try to turn back the wheel of history. Should they ever be revolutionary, they are so from fear of being forced down into the ranks of the proletariat, thus defending not their present, but their future interests, and thus abandoning their own standpoint to adopt that of the proletariat. The slum population, so this is talking about like liberals in particular, but also how like people who can claim to be for change and resisting the ruling class, that they often are not wanting liberation for everyone, or they're wanting to define the terms of what liberation means because they are still wanting to maintain this power hierarchy, that they are not wanting to give up any sort of privilege that they have, and that it is at the expense of the working class, truly the working class, and revolutionary movements. The slum population, that passively putrefying scum of the lowest layers of past society, is sometimes set in movement by a proletarian revolution, but its whole conditions of life prepare it rather to sell itself to the reactionary forces. The social conditions of past society are already swamped in the social conditions of the proletariat. The proletarian is propertyless. His relations to his wife and children have nothing now in common with bourgeois family relations, modern industrial labor, modern enslavement by capital, the same in England as in France, in America as in Germany, as we're talking about, has despoiled him of all national character. Law, morality, religion are for him merely so many bourgeois prejudices behind which as many bourgeois interests are concealed. All previous classes that have conquered power tried to consolidate their acquired position by subjecting the whole of society to their own mode of appropriation. Yes, rather, so the people who gain power are wanting to impose their own idea of what it means to be existing in a fair society, but where they are still at the top, rather than deciding by democratic means. The proletarians cannot become masters of the productive forces of society without abolishing their own previous mode of appropriation, and with it every other previous mode of production. The proletarians have nothing of their own to secure. They must destroy all previous securities for and insurances of individual property. All previous historical movements were movements of minorities or in the interest of minorities. The proletarian movement is the conscious movement of the immense majority in the interest of the immense majority, yes. The proletariat, the lowest stratum of existing society, cannot stir, cannot raise itself up without the whole of the higher strata, forming official society being sprung into the air. Though not the substance, yet the form of the struggle of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie is national at first. The proletariat of each country naturally must first settle accounts with its own bourgeoisie. In sketching the most general phases of the development of the proletariat, we have depicted the more or less concealed civil war within existing society up to the point where it breaks out into open revolution, and where the violent overthrow of the bourgeoisie lays the foundation of the rule of the proletariat. So it's also talking about this aspect of any type of form that is of resistance or protest that is viewed as acceptable to the bourgeoisie usually will not have long-lasting effects in making it so that we have, or that the proletariat has power in the end, that there isn't this conceding of power constantly where the bourgeoisie is always in charge and centered and controlling all of these movements. All previous forms of society were based, as we've seen, on the antagonism of the oppressing and oppressed classes. But in order to be able to oppress a class, it is at least necessary to guarantee to it the conditions for continuing its slavish existence. The serf in feudal times raised himself to membership in the commune, just as the petty bourgeois attained the position of a bourgeois under the yoke of feudal absolutism. The modern worker, on the contrary, instead of rising with the progress of industry, sinks ever deeper beneath the social conditions of his own class. The laborer becomes the pauper, and pauperism increases even more rapidly than population and wealth. It is thus clear that the bourgeoisie is unfit any longer to remain the ruling class in any society. Nope, not any. That was my insertion. The ruling class in society, and to impose on society as a supreme law the social system of its class. It is unfit to rule because it is unable to assure existence in slavery to its slave, because it is forced to let him sink into a state in which it must feed him instead of being fed by him. Society can exist under its rule no longer, i.e., its existence is no longer compatible with that of society. The essential condition for the existence and rule of the bourgeois class is the accumulation of wealth in private hands, the formation and increase of capital. The essential condition of capital is wage labor. Wage labor rests entirely on the competition among the workers. The progress of industry, of which the bourgeoisie is the involuntary and irresistible agent, replaces the isolation of the workers due to competition by their revolutionary union through association. With the development of modern industry, therefore, the very ground whereby it has established its system of production and appropriation is cut from under the feet of the bourgeoisie. It produces, above all, its own grave diggers. Its downfall and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable. All right. That is it for the reading today. This is such a cute exchange happening in the chat. Yeah, of course. Thanks for being here. Tomorrow, I'm going to keep going over some global events that are going on, as well as touch on some of these national events. And we will also watch this second part. Of the series that PhilosophyTube has on Marx, and talking about specifically capitalism's consequences. So, there we go. Sometimes hard to follow, but I get better. I mean, again, like, I don't know German, so I need to get better at learning other languages. And also, like, this stuff can be kind of dense, so, like, don't be hard on yourself. I'm still learning how to understand what all of this means. I think if we're all being honest with ourselves, we do. We're all doing this. Which part of the US are you from? Yeah, I'm from Utah. Unfortunately. It is a state in the US that is very conservative. It recently has gotten a little more attention with this data center that is being built. I mean, there are many that are being built here, but this guy from the show Shark Tank is trying to build a data center here. Also, I know, like, more people online have been talking about, like, this Lego guy, like this Lego situation that happened in Utah. It happened in American Fork, which is a place that my partner and I actually used to live, and it's a bleak place. Them talking about, like, police corruption and, like, police brutality. It's like, yeah, that exists. That exists there. Come to Berlin. I know, I need to visit. I need to just, like, leave the US in general, but, you know, it is a difficult thing to do, like, finding a job and, like, means to be moving places. Deutschstein sehr schwerer, aber schöne Sprach. That was probably so bad. uh, German is a hard but cute language. Mentioning Mormonism, yes. Passport 2. Ooh, interesting. I do need to check that out. I would love to be an expat. And especially with all of the stuff that I talk about, I'm like, well, I don't know how safe it is really here. Not only being queer and like multiracial, I don't have it nearly as bad as what many other people do. But yeah, it would be nice to leave. Isn't schöne more like beautiful? Wow. You disagree with the term expat? That's fair. I know people do. Especially with you, or schön? I'm displaying my egregious lack of knowledge. Wonderful. Beautiful. Oh. I'm not sure I knew that. Interesting. Okay. Well, it was lovely chatting with you all. And I think you can still be chatting even if I'm offline? Maybe? If not, you are also welcome to join the Discord where you can continue a conversation. I should probably know that as a streamer, if you're able to still like communicate with each other when I end the stream. That would be good to know. I should look that up. Anyway, that'll be it for me today. But thank you all for being here. It was lovely chatting with you, and I love to see these connections being made. Oh, yes, you can? Okay, cool. That's like one of the reasons why I even wanted to stream in the first place. Is like for people to feel like there are other people to talk to. So, all right. I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, wherever you are. India, Germany. And hopefully I will see you soon. Okay, bye.